Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Garrity is away, and here in his place, we're happy to have back Emily Jashinsky. She is the DC correspondent for UnHerd. She is also the one who runs the National Journalism Center, and she is also the co-host of Breaking Points. Emily, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me for this Three Martini Lunch.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of fun until you find out that they're all virtual, but it's still fun. So let's
Probably
start with
the best.
Yes, exactly right. And so let's start with our good martini. And just yesterday on the program, Andy McCarthy, who was filling in for Jim, and I were talking about how Republicans sometimes struggle to be able to explain their positions, which shouldn't be that complicated on issues. Feels like they fumbled on what to do in the wake of the Dobbs decision. They don't seem to have a coherent argument when there's an easy one, or maybe they're just unwilling to explain why it's insane to force women to sign up for selective service and be eligible for a potential future draft, which is what we talked about yesterday. But sometimes Republicans actually do have really strong, coherent arguments, and that's the case with Condoleezza Rice, the former Secretary of State. She's now affiliated with the Hoover Institution out there at Stanford University. And she was talking about school choice. And of course, the left hates the idea of school choice, and it especially hates the idea of your tax dollars following your kids to the school of your choice. But here's what she had to say about the leftist hypocrisy on school choice.
So are you for school choice or not? We already have a choice system in education. If you are of means, you will move to a district where the schools are good and the houses are expensive, like Palo Alto, California. If you go across the street from Stanford, Palo Alto High has a performance arts center that looks like a smaller version of Stanford's. If you're really wealthy, you will send your kids to private schools. So who's stuck in failing neighborhood schools? Poor kids. A lot of them minority kids. So how can you say you're for civil rights? How can you say you're for the poor when you're condemning those children to not being able to read? By the time they're in third grade, they're never going to read. So if you want to say that school choice and vouchers and charter schools are destroying the public schools, fine. You write that editorial in the Washington Post, but then don't send your kids to Sidwell Friends.
That's a total mic drop moment right there. For those who don't know, Sidwell Friends is this elite private school up near the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. The Clintons sent Chelsea there. The Obama sent their kids there. And a lot of the highfalutin families in D.C. sent their kids there. So, Emily, what do you make of the way she broke that down, putting Democrats on the defensive? If Republicans want kind of a primer on how to deal with this issue in debates across the country this year, pretty good example right there.
Yeah, and as often as I disagree with Condoleezza Rice, it was so beautiful. I mean, I felt like there should have been triumphant music, like crescendoing in the background until she got to the Sidwell Friends point, which was just so excellent. And on that point, it basically was precisely undermining the argument that the left makes about how school choice takes money away from these struggling public schools, et cetera, because what she hit on there is that either way, it's a matter of choice. People are going to choose to send their kids to elite schools, even if the public schools are well funded. What is not going to happen in that case is that the lower income people are going to have the choice too. So I think she actually hit the best version of the left's argument against school choice, and she did it in some ways using their own language. So it was fantastic.
Oh, exactly. And one of the things you watch as this happens state to state to state, and Corey DeAngelis loves to do this in his tweets, is every time there's a Democratic lawmaker railing against the idea of school choice and we got to stand up and put all of our efforts into the public schools, and he's like, their kids go to private school. You went to private school.
Every time.
It's just, it feels like, at least at the red state level, that the right is winning on this issue. Am I reading that right, or is it just a matter of where they have the votes right now that they can get it done? And is this a winning issue that Trump and senators and people running for the House should really pile onto this year?
It's a total winning issue, and I think the right has seen why, and it's exactly what Condoleezza Rice, I think, demonstrated. It's because you can use the left's own language against it in this case, and you can use a lot of their own arguments against them in this case when you're talking about socioeconomic upward mobility and discrimination. That's all on full display if you're blocking school choice. So I think they absolutely have momentum, and people like Corey have tracked and have been a part of spreading it across so many different states. I think probably the next wave of it is going to really be in blue states, where this language works, where maybe it's more like purple states, purple-blue states, sort of left of center states. I think that's where the next wave is actually going to be. That's where a lot of the momentum and energy is going to be going forward because of how well it's worked in so many red states.
Yeah, this is one of those issues that cuts across party lines pretty well. There's so many families who are sick and tired of schools, and we see, I think Baltimore recently has showed 40% of high schools had 0 kids at reading or math skills at grade level. So it's just a total train wreck, especially in some of the more urban areas. And so giving families that option is definitely the way to go.
Totally agree.
Well, let me add some even more good news, and that is Moinkbox. Fewer things are going to put a bigger smile on your face in a day than finding out there's a Moinkbox waiting for you on your front porch and knowing that it contains fantastic meat that you personally selected. I love the bacon. I love the steaks. They're really good sized and they have a ton of flavor, but there's also lamb and pork and chicken and even Alaskan salmon. Moink farmers farm like our grandparents did, and as a result, Moink meat tastes like it should, and it's a difference you can taste. You don't have to worry about strange chemicals coming through in your diet because the meat was processed over in China or somewhere else like that. I absolutely love the Moinkbox, and I know you will too. And right now they got a great offer going. Keep American farming going by signing up at moinkbox.com/martini right now. And listeners of the 3 Martini Lunch will get free bacon for a year. Yeah, 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but it's only for a limited time. Spelled MOINK box.com/martini. That's moinkbox.com/martini. All right, Emily, on to our bad martini now. And for this, we head over to the state of Texas. As is always the case when it comes to issues that the left finds unpopular, they'll first tell you that it's not happening, and then they'll eventually admit that it's happening, but that it's good. And so I'm not sure exactly where we are in that process against Texas Children's Hospital, but for the longest time, they claim that, oh, no, we're not doing sex change surgeries on minors. Well, now we know that they have been doing sex change surgeries on minors. And the reason we know that is because Dr. Eithan Haim is the one who blew the whistle on this, bringing forth documentation from the hospital, not disclosing names or ages or any information that's going to expose the patients here. Nonetheless, he has now been indicted by the Biden Justice Department for obtaining protected individual health information for patients that were not under his care and without authorization. And so basically the idea here is that he's violating HIPAA, even though he went to great lengths not to violate anybody's personal information. But this smacks a lot to me, at least, Emily, like the situation with the Center for Medical Progress, who did the undercover videos with Planned Parenthood as they were basically harvesting organs from aborted babies. And then the reaction from the left, who was in power in California, and now the case here with the Justice Department, is not, oh, look at this horrifying conduct that's been uncovered. It's, how did you get that? You're going to jail.
Well, yeah, and I like the way you started, because it's first always like, well, that's not happening. It's all overblown. And then it's also like the banned books narrative, right? Like there's no porn in schools. Actually, there is, and we need it, and it's beautiful, and it's a human right. It's the same pattern across the board. It happens every time. And in this case, I mean, you see the momentum in Europe against what some of these places have been doing. And it started in some ways with whistleblowers. It started in some ways by people who had been involved. This happened in Missouri with the woman who whistleblew to the Free Press recently, saying, this made me really uncomfortable. I'm on the left. In some cases, they're LGBT themselves. This made me really uncomfortable. And what ended up happening there is it was just a matter of time as the experiment played out for way too long, I might add. But as the experiment played out, it sort of was predictable. People were really, really uncomfortable with the results. And I think we're seeing a version of that play out here in the States.
So where does this go from here? I mean, if the Justice Department can do this, is this going to chill efforts to expose this at other places, or is it going to motivate people to do it because it has to be done, but they're just going to have to do it at the risk of being prosecuted?
I think it's weird because we're seeing both happen. And I think decisions like this galvanize both of those trends. You see more chilling, but then you also see more people being like, this is so ridiculous. I have to say something because, the stakes are so high and everything is so absurd. And it's a matter of how many people go to each trend. And I feel like we still don't know the answer to that. But I would say my guess is for every one person who is rightfully finds this chilling, there are 2 people who find it galvanizing. That's my prediction right now, or that's my sort of sense of what's happening right now.
Emily, you debate people on the left all the time, so you understand how they think and what issues are rising for them. So how do they see this? Do they see this as overblown? Have they kind of locked into the LGBT agenda that this needs to be affirmed and that it's the right that's the problem here? So what's the trend line here, especially among younger people?
They're super polarized. So on the left, you have a contingent of sort of center left and far left, sort of old school Marxist left, that are really sort of exhausted with the issue, understand that it's gone too far. And then you have, unfortunately, the progressive base, the Squad, for example. These are not people that are giving up on the trans human right issue, the sort of children issue, the women's sports issue. They can't. They've invested way too much in terms of just like energy, in terms of political capital to walk back. And so while I think the center left is really exhausted with this, and then you have those sort of fringe old Marxists who are exhausted with it and probably were never on board, still in the same place, it's that progressive activist base that's going to be a problem for the left going forward because they're not in any way exhausted by it. They are extremely energized and passionate about it, and that's a huge problem.
I'll ask the exit question here the same way I did on the school choice issue. Is this a winning issue for the right? Should it be talked about a lot? It seems like the numbers are definitely on the right side, but at the same time, we see, like in Maryland, when a biological male wins the contest, we see all the girls in the background cheering. And so ultimately, is this one that's going to be a winner for the right, or do they risk further exhausting the center left, who they might have a chance at peeling off some votes from?
No, I think this one's absolutely a winner because I think even young voters are polarized on it. If you look at polling, actually, Gen Z is super polarized on the question of LGBT, so the full spectrum of LGBT issues, and increasingly. So some of those numbers are going in a fascinating direction, different than what a lot of people predicted that they would go. So I would say not to obsess about it in a creepy way. Obviously, you don't want candidates who are just like only talking about, like especially men, right, like only talking about how kids are being transed. But when the issue is salient in a state race, if it's happening in your state, if there are real things that you can talk about and oppose, I would say go for it in terms of the political ramifications.
Absolutely. Opportunities for our daughters being stolen and denied in many different ways. I think that resonates very, very well. All right, well, that was certainly some horrible news, and we've got crazy news to come that's not going to be any more encouraging. So let me inject a little bit of positivity here and talk about Lumen. What did you do when you woke up this morning? Did you just fumble for the alarm to turn it off? Did you check messages? Did you maybe actually speak with someone in your home? That would be nice. But when you draw that first breath, or at least one of those first breaths in the morning after you wake up, make it a breath into your Lumen, because Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it'll let you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and then give you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And knowing what's happening in your metabolism will lead to better weight management, energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep. And the best part of all is that it's so simple. It's not going to take up a lot of your time. Literally, all you have to do is breathe. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Emily, on to our double-fisted crazy martini here as we close out. Big picture and little picture here in terms of how the government wastes money. We know that the federal debt is now $35 trillion. John Bresnahan over at Punchbowl News just tweeting this out the other day. New Congressional Budget Office says federal budget deficit will be $1.9 trillion for fiscal year 2024, $400 billion worse than it estimated in February. And he says the CBO says the federal government will run a $24 trillion deficit over the next decade. And some people think that's actually a bit optimistic. He says the Biden college loan forgiveness program, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan aid, bank failures, soaring Medicare costs are among the reasons why the deficit is much higher than the previous estimate. What they don't want to talk about, of course, is that with higher interest rates, the mandatory interest payments on the debt are now a major, major problem for Congress as well. It's taking up a bigger and bigger chunk of mandatory spending. Meanwhile, Brendan Carr, a commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission, a Republican appointee, talking about how some money gets allocated and then just sits there. So I guess it hasn't been wasted in other ways, but it still hasn't done any good. He says in 2021, the Biden administration got $42.45 billion from Congress to deploy high-speed internet to millions of Americans. Years later, it has not connected even one person with those funds. In fact, it now says that no construction projects will even start until 2025 at the earliest. And so for those who are already pretty cynical about the government's efficiency or lack thereof on both of these subjects, it's maddening but not surprising.
And what really terrifies me is the interest that we're paying on the debt, and the way that if you look at the charts of what we're going to be paying, what we're already paying in terms of interest on the debt, but what we're going to be paying in just 10 years. And you know that we actually are going to be paying that in 10 years because literally nobody in Congress has a serious plan with any political reality in mind to deal with this. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that this issue is going to be dealt with by Congress or the government at large going forward because nobody has a substantive plan or B, the political will to do it.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And both parties are responsible because both always rail against the party that's in power. Barack Obama called it not only immoral, but unpatriotic, how much debt George W. Bush had run up. And there was quite a bit. And then Barack Obama immediately piled on way, way more. Republicans ran against that to some extent in 2016. But then Trump said, I'm not touching entitlements. And then, especially when you factor in all the extra COVID spending, that 4 years definitely was red ink. And Biden, while pretending, and I don't know where he gets the comparison of that he's reduced the deficit. Maybe he's comparing it to when we had to pile on $6 trillion extra to combat COVID. But compared to 2019 or anything before that, it's just complete fiction. And so he can talk about it all he wants, but it's just spiraling more and more.
The Biden numbers are terrifying. I mean, when I look at the spike in spending, it's just shocking in the Biden. I don't know if the country, I mean, maybe you can go back to the Reagan era during the Cold War, but the COVID era, I mean, that's where it was all justified. The first COVID bill that Biden passed, it is genuinely a shocking increase, more than I even understood until I saw the numbers. So good luck to all of us.
Yeah, $2 trillion on a bill when we were basically coming out of the pandemic just fine. And so that just piled on. And then, of course, you got to love the philosophy of anyone who says they're reducing inflation by spending another $500 billion, or maybe it ended up being $1 trillion. I don't know. It's all play money at this point in D.C. And of course, you've got virtually no one with a plan to deal with it in this campaign season. So, Emily, I'm sure we're both going to deal with that. You're a little bit younger than me, so you'll have higher bills than me for longer. But nonetheless, hopefully sanity will return to D.C. at some point, but I don't think it's going to be super soon. But always great to have you with us. Thanks for your insights, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Greg.
Emily Jashinsky is the DC correspondent for UnHerd. She is also the co-host of Breaking Points, and she runs the National Journalism Center. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe to our podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about it as well. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They really do help us out a lot. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us all on Twitter. Emily is at Emily Jashinsky. Jim is at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.